my life, I've been a global traveller, seeking cultures and traditions that are just as vibrant today as in times past. We're opening doors, stepping into worlds most never see, because that's where the best stories are. We're sharing tales of local life and the working world, plus spending time with some of the most interesting people you'd ever want to meet. It's truly privileged access that always leaves me excited to explore more. In this episode of Exploring More with Karine, we'll immerse you in art and architecture. In Norway, we'll examine the life of Edvard Munch, the artist behind the Scream. Then it's off to Italy for a behind-the-scenes look at the restoration of Michelangelo's David. And finally, we'll head to Spain for the thought-provoking architecture of Antoni Gaudí. Let's get started in Norway, where we'll step into the inspired paintings and vivid imagination of Edvard Munch. In all the world, there's one haunting image that grips us like no other. Art you can feel but not explain. The painting is The Scream by Norway's Edvard Munch.
I think that the reason Edvard Munch means so much to so many people all over the world is because he is dealing with existential and fundamental aspects of what it is to be a human being.
Through art, Munch overcame a childhood of poverty and poor health, and became a pioneer of the Expressionist movement. His intriguing works reflected the turbulent world swirling around him. The thought-provoking, often torturous art, speaking with a voice that is impossible to ignore.
He is dealing with disease, jealousy, melancholia, all kinds of emotional and difficult problems that you have to deal with as a human being, choices that you have to make.
Much of Munch's art remains misunderstood. A vivid example is the painting many call Vampire. The real title is Love and Pain, depicting a woman consoling her lover. Despite a life of controversy and personal struggles, Edvard Munch persevered.
Edvard Munch actually produced all his life. He was an artist more than 60 years. Scream is a powerful work, one of the most known works in the world, but he has other very, very strong works as well.
Munch was extremely prolific, and the extent of his works is actually difficult to grasp. In all, he produced more than 40,000 pieces of art that included paintings, photography, woodcuts, and even lithographs and etchings. While creating art was his passion, letting go of what he called his children was another matter. After Munch's death, more than 20,000 pieces of art were discovered at his studio, and they now reside at the MUNCH Museum in Oslo.
As director of the MUNCH Museum in Oslo, I like to welcome the Viking guests to our museum. It's probably the biggest one-artist museum in the world, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the stay, and I look so much forward to see you here in Oslo.
Edvard Munch is a priceless part of Norway's culture and traditions. We look forward to sharing with you our country's many treasures. Now we're off to Florence, Italy to meet the woman who restored Michelangelo's David. Michelangelo's David. It's one of the most cherished pieces of art in the world. But this was not always the case. Unveiled on Piazza della Signoria in 1504, David was promptly stoned, while riots in 1527 took his arm off. For 3.5 centuries, David endured sweltering summers, freezing winters, and acid rain, before finally being moved inside the Galleria dell'Accademia. Though one would have thought David was now safe, he sustained yet more damage over the years, from misguided restorations and the hammer of a deranged artist who took off a toe in 1991. To celebrate David's 500th anniversary, his massive 209 square foot surface was restored, all while the museum remained open to the public.
The first day I will never forget. It was overwhelming. When I climbed to the top of the scaffolding and looked into his eyes, they were fearsome. Oh my God, so big.
Erano grandi così.
In David's eyes, I also felt the gaze of Michelangelo, and I was determined to honor this masterpiece that had been placed in my hands.
After 11 years of study and a false start using a dry method, the restoration began, employing a wet technique.
To remove the dirt that had penetrated deeper into the surface, I applied compresses of distilled water and clay called seppulite. But not directly. In between, I placed handmade Japanese paper. This approach softened and drew the deep dirt out, which I then delicately removed millimeter by millimeter.
Millimetricamente ho rimosso lo sporco ammorbidito.
But some of the worst spots on David were caused by two very aggressive restorations in the 19th century that shockingly utilized hydrochloric acid and iron brushes. Beyond that, the marble itself is of very poor quality, poor enough that two sculptors rejected the original block, and it lay abandoned for decades before Michelangelo raised his chisel.
The inferior marble left David's surface littered with veins and holes known as terroli, caused by wrong marble positioning. So I had to be patient, filling them one by one with a matching mixture of colored marble dust and lime mortar.
Stuccato questi microbuchini. È un lavoro abbastanza lungo e meticoloso.
While now nearly flawless, David's arm, broken off during an anti-Medici uprising, had to be addressed. It's been said a bench hurled from Palazzo Vecchio took the arm off, breaking it into 9 pieces. Those repairs had to be stripped away, then replaced by new plaster and blended one stroke at a time.
At a towering 17 feet tall, David was difficult. All the twisting and leaning it took to reach the many curves was incredibly intense. But just as David faced Goliath and emerged victorious, I met my challenge. I as David, and David the sculpture as the giant.
Mi sono sentita io il David e lui il gigante.
Finally, after 5 centuries, this handsome colossus is once again being seen much as Michelangelo intended. The exquisite David is but one of Italy's countless artistic masterpieces. I hope you'll have the chance to explore Italy's many treasures. Our final stop takes us to Spain, where we'll share the groundbreaking work of architect Antoni Gaudí. It's been said the eyes are a window into the soul, but these eyes masked an astonishing imagination. Antoni Gaudí possessed such a unique view of the world that his college president commented during graduation, "We're in the presence of either a genius or a madman." Born in 1852, Gaudí's influence on the architecture and character of Barcelona is unmistakable. His style defied categorization, emulating the flowing rhythm of nature. Few at the time understood his work, including the city of Barcelona, which awarded him just one project for street lamps. Gaudí's most impassioned work was Sagrada Familia. Inside, the design resembles a stone forest, the powerful tree trunks reaching for the sky, complete with branches and leaves at the top. Gaudí orchestrated every detail here, even choosing the different types of stone for the pillars to optimize weight distribution, which is why they're different colors. But what surprised me most is that the Sagrada Familia began in 1882, still isn't finished, and it won't be until 2026. At Park Güell, Gaudí sought to infuse his work with the complex patterns he'd observed in nature. It was an unrelenting quest that also turned him into an avid recycler.
All those styles and ceramics before being in here were in balconies, kitchens, bathrooms, places like that.
Gaudí's obsession with nature was anything but a passing fancy. It began, in fact, in childhood with a diagnosis of rheumatism, a condition that left him isolated.
When he was a kid, he was sick, so he would not play with the rest of the children. So he spent a long time alone just observing nature.
Gaudí's epiphany was that man creates with straight lines, while God fills nature with graceful curves and angles. At Casa Batlló, Gaudí abandoned straight lines entirely. The result was nothing short of astonishing. Especially the roofline, which it said depicts a slain dragon, complete with a sword sticking out of its back.
The everyday people didn't understand anything of him. It was too modern. He broke with the lines of all the other houses, and he began to do really things that were absolutely a scandal for most of the people. He developed his own style, and I think he marked then the architecture of the future. There is no one like him.
Gaudí's passion for architecture burned so intense he worked every day of his career. A career that left a multitude of original works for later generations to contemplate. In the end, the man who helped shape the soul of Barcelona was recognized by the world with 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. A lasting tribute for one of Barcelona's most inspiring citizens. Join us again here on Viking.TV as we open more doors around the world on our quest to explore the planet's most fascinating cultures and delightful traditions.